Good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan Chacon from IoT for All. For those of you who are unfamiliar with IoT for All, we are a leading publication and media company focused on IoT, ML, AI, digital transformation, kind of the whole spectrum there. I'm personally quite excited to be here, and just to make sure everybody is in the right place, this is accelerating growth in IoT technology, leveraging insurance and construction partnerships. So for the next hour or so, we're going to be moving from theoretical to literal, looking on how IoT innovations are shaping the insurance world. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and introduce our wonderful speakers here today. Rose, let's start with you. We'll move over to Chris and then Shkya from there.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm Rose Hall. I'm the VP and Head of Construction Innovation for AXA XL. AXA XL is a global insurance company providing primary casualty insurance across the world. We're owned by AXA Group. I'm part of the North America Construction Business Unit, and we provide all lines of business to construction contractors in North America, mostly the ENR Top 400. My background is in construction and civil engineering, so I come from industry, and I'm excited to be here and talk with you about how technology and IoT is changing construction insurance.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Greene. I'm the Director of Analytics for Aon for Construction North America. We are a global brokerage as well, and basically, we've started down this tech journey a few years ago. We started the technology assessment panel. We started looking at IoT techs and really doing a deep dive into the space for our construction clients. So I'm happy to be here and be part of this discussion.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shaya Ghanbarian, and I'm the Vice President of Sales and Business Development. I specifically focus on our insurance and broker relationships, as well as strategic partnerships at Eddy Solutions. And Eddy, we are a North American manufacturer of smart water monitoring and leak mitigation technologies. And our products and services are designed to protect all property types and conserve water through intelligent water management. Very excited to be here today and looking forward to this panel.
Fantastic. Thank you all for those introductions and joining us today for this chat. Before we dive in, I want to do a quick housekeeping item for our audience out there. There is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions throughout the entire panel, please feel free to leave them in there. We'll try to get to them. If they fit in during the chat, we'll grab them. If not, we have a 10-minute, 15-minute kind of piece at the end that we're going to be designating for those questions. So feel free to leave them throughout the conversation. Other than that, I think we can get started, and I want to start off with the first question here, which is around innovation. So the construction world in particular is facing a lot of change, a lot of significant change. So Rose, I'd love it if you could kind of talk us through, from your perspective, what change you are seeing on your end.
Yeah, so I've been a part of the construction world for 20 plus years, and the last couple of years have been really exciting because we've seen traditionally, people think of construction as laggards in the technology space, and that's been true for a lot of years, but not in the most recent years. The biggest problem about let's call it 10 years ago, was that there was no tech in construction. The biggest problem now is that there's too much. So the curation of technology and really weeding out what is valuable and what's just a shiny, blinky object is one of the challenges that contractors are facing. We know that technology is going to help contractors be safer, more profitable, increase productivity, and allow us to deliver more projects on time, on budget, and as safely as possible. And so as their insurer, we decided that it was a good idea to help them get to that space where we're their partner in risk, and we help curate various technologies that support contractors in evolving into this next iteration of technology. So I think that contractors are more innovative than they get credit for. There's a really large group of contractors leading the way in IoT and technology that's really just breaking new ground and changing the way we do business. And so that's extremely innovative, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
That's fantastic. Chris, what about you? What do you think from your end?
Yeah, and I mean, Rose, I echo that. We're going down the same path, and it's really good to see some of our insurer partners kind of go down this path with us, because it truly does make a huge difference for our clients. And like you said, the industry is really booming, in the tech space in the past few years for our contractors. So much so that they've had to hire people like chief innovation officers, chief data officers, just to kind of keep up with the pace of things. And like 5-6 years ago, they had hundreds of companies, tech companies, knocking at their door. Not all of them solved some of the biggest problems that we're seeing in the market. Not all of them have the biggest impact, but we're starting to work with insurers. We're starting to work more with general contractors, and all the stakeholders are really understanding, what are the real issues and what can specific IoT techs or specific construction technology companies do to help you mitigate that. And how does it all fit together? So it's really about those things like being on time, on budget, becoming more productive, and they realize that they have all of this data that's kind of gold in the ground that they have to dig for. These tech companies are helping them bring that up to make them more productive and really give them a competitive advantage.
Fantastic. Shkya, what do you think?
I have to definitely echo Rose and Chris there. There's definitely been a lot of movement in the construction industry, and really all the stakeholders that are involved are starting to see the benefits of technology for their builds. And many of them already kind of taking steps to make sure they're implementing various IoT devices to be able to reap the benefits of smarter builds. So obviously I have the opportunity to work with insurance companies and brokers. Aon XXL, of course, are some of our partners. And I feel like builder's risk has definitely been an area of focus for all the stakeholders involved by leveraging these technologies to ensure they're mitigating risk. And from an Eddy's perspective, our help to, we want to be able to help mitigate the risk of water damage, but also be able to add additional benefits for our partners and their clients by letting them utilize our communication platform, Youre, to add other devices. As Rose mentioned, there's a lot of technologies out there. So we do one component of water, but it's important for us to give the platform for our clients to be able to add other devices that will be able to mitigate other risks during their build as well.
One question I had kind of as a follow-up, Chris, you mentioned that a lot of the conversations you're having, people are really understanding and kind of getting this more, the change that's happening kind of across the board. Is there anything you're seeing that's kind of happened on the educational component side of things that's leading to these conversations being easier to have and understanding kind of the benefits of both sides of this change that's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's getting a little bit easier to kind of understand, like we're shifting more from the buzzwords that were thrown around, a few years ago, just, big data, AI, all that stuff that didn't really have any tangible meaning or connection to the contractor. We really had to start with, okay, understanding the operations of their business, understanding what's possible, making it simple, and just education across all of the stakeholders, because it really, like Rose mentioned this to me a while ago, there has to be a culture of risk management and safety that bring IoT together in with that. So that takes the insurer, the broker, the contractor, the GC and the owner, and as well as each tech company to come together and to really kind of do a deep dive to make a bespoke offering to help you mitigate your specific risks.
And before we jump into this next question that we have scheduled here, Rose, I wanted to actually have you talk about that culture and kind of how that's kind of come to be and the big changes you're seeing there.
Yeah, I was going to weigh in on that. So thanks. Yeah, actually, we talk about the stakeholders in a construction project, and we typically think of the owners, the contractors, the subcontractors, but the insurers and the brokers are stakeholders as well. So involving all of the people that share the risk in the project to create this increase of knowledge, like you said, in education is really important. And so we took that on. We took that head on here at XXL, and we created our construction ecosystem, which is Eddy Solutions is a part of. That's how I got to know all of you fine folks. But we have programs for education. So we have what we call our Tech Tapas webinar series, which is small bites of tech, as you might imagine, from the tapas. We have a group called the Innovator Circle, which is a roundtable consortium of the innovation leaders, as Chris was mentioning. A lot of contractors have hired themselves a chief innovation officer to really drive this movement forward. So when we put them all in a room and discuss what the common problems are, we feel we can really start to solve them in a holistic way. We've got a variety of other solutions and resources for our customers, including our tech library and other communities that are designed around education. So, as I was saying before, there used to be not enough tech, now there's too much, and the curation and the education of that and the ability to cull it down to a dull roar is really becoming the value in driving the whole movement forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we saw that when we started IoT for All many years ago. It was just as all these new technologies were coming to to play. People were just very confused. It was a very different environment, and they were looking for ways that, from these non-technical individuals especially, on how they could understand these technologies that are supposed to impact and benefit their businesses. So the fact that you all have understood and seen how important the knowledge sharing and the education piece is, and committing to do that, I think is a huge stride in being able to kind of handle this change that we're kind of been talking about here for the last couple of minutes. That's fantastic.
And we've all been learning, for the past few years as well. I've seen, all of you guys, Shkya, Rose, in all of the big tech conferences. We're bringing our contractors there. We're seeing brokers and insurers, everyone just kind of learning along the way. And we've made huge strides just in the past few years in understanding what's needed and how we can better our clients and the assets that they build.
Yeah, I think it's super important. Absolutely. But I want to take a step back here for a second and talk about the risks in the construction world, particularly. Chris, can you try to share what you're seeing are the biggest risks from your perspective?
Yeah, so we have been doing deep dives into what we're calling the root cause of loss. So that's when we're taking our construction clients' claims and loss data and really identifying, okay, what's the root cause of loss? Because traditionally, it hasn't been industry standards to really collect a lot of information about what's going wrong. We know, in a broad sense, generally, whether it's water, whether it's fire, but that's tier one. We need to get down to tier two and say, okay, was the water a leak? Was it an envelope failure? Was it, someone that hasn't been trained properly? Certain things like that. As we get closer to that, tier one, tier two, tier three, root cause of loss, then we start to understand really what's going wrong. So, but I mean, across the board, water is definitely the biggest issue that we're seeing for insurers, for our clients. That's always the biggest of the categories. Weather is a huge risk, worker injury. We see a lot of concrete issues, concrete failures, fire. But you can see how, okay, we have a broad range of risks that are, from 1 to 5 or 1 to 20, however long you want to go. It takes a lot of these different IoT devices and techs to kind of come together to understand all of those risks. So we can say, okay, how does this trigger the other one? And, really create that kind of succinct connection between the guts of the building or the nervous system to say, okay, if you have a pain point here, how does it affect everything else? Because one risk may affect another.
Absolutely. Rose, what are you seeing from your end as the biggest risk?
Well, Chris is right on the money. If I take a different angle on it and say, contractors are meant to deliver to their owners a quality project on time, on budget, safely, right? Those 4 pillars are what we're contracted to do. That's why they call them contractors. Safety, cost, quality, and schedule. And then we distill that down into what can technology help us do. And there's a variety of use cases. I would say everything from productivity to safety to water mitigation, telematics. The top ones that contractors have been asking us about and what got us started on this journey to this ecosystem, right? This came from our customers. So they've been looking to us as their partner in risk for many years, and they would say, hey, what do I do about this risk or that risk? And now they're saying, hey, what tech can I use to mitigate this risk or that risk? The narrative's changed a little bit. And what they've been asking about the most is water mitigation is the number one. Number 2, I would say, is telematics. Imagery is a really big one, and it doesn't have a direct correlation to safety, cost, quality, or schedule, but it has multiple indirect relationships. And what I mean by that is a 360 imagery capture can tell you a tremendous amount of information. So it's not, like water mitigation is a very direct correlation to risk reduction. You see an alert, you can shut off the water, and boom, you've mitigated a risk, right? And you can quantify that. Imagery is a little bit different, but equally as valuable because it crosses over so many use cases. So with 360 imagery, you can hold up a camera and take one photo of a room. And from that, there are certain programs that you can correlate that to the BIM model, to the schedule, to the cost, and it all gets tied in there if you have the right computer vision and photogrammetry programming for the 360 imagery. And then you also have proof positive or negative, if you will, on what was there or not there in the event of a claim or litigation, litigation for the construction space. A lot of times construction defect will go back, the tales of repose, the statute of repose are 5, sometimes 10, 12 years. And they'll go back and say, gee, what was in the walls or how was it built? And having that information as the contractor is a really great way to protect your company, protect the owner, protect the building. So there's a variety of things that imagery is really, really strong on. So if I had to pick 3 that are the most common right now, I'd say water mitigation, fleet telematics, for vehicles and imagery.
Fantastic. And Shkya, I wanted to bring you in and kind of get your perspective on the biggest risk that you're seeing on your end.
Yeah, so obviously a lot of the discussions I have with our insurance partners are around the risks of water. So it's a really good time to be a water mitigation technology company, as we're able to kind of fill that big gap that they're seeing in terms of the frequency of the claims that they're getting for builds as it relates to water. But I think one thing that was really interesting from the data from working with insurance partners was looking at when these claims were happening. And many of these claims are taking place on the off hours and days when no one is on site, which certainly shows the importance of utilizing technology to be able to essentially give you that 24/7 security service when no one is there. So hardly ever they're going to have a massive water damage claim between Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 when there's people on site. It happens on a Saturday at 8 a.m. where the water runs till Monday, 7 a.m. and somebody comes in and you've lost all those finishings and you have thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars of damages that are done. So from our perspective, we take a lot of this information from our partners and we want to build additional value by creating specific business rules to ensure the property is the most protected during those off hours and days by utilizing our AI to make sure that essentially our algorithms are hypersensitive and they're making sure that we're taking the data that they have into consideration when we're creating our packages.
That's fantastic. One of the questions I kind of had, just as a follow-up to this, is are you all seeing with the water mitigation, with the fleet telematics, the things you mentioned, Rose, as the main risk, are you seeing the solutions in the market being able to easily be adopted by different contractors, different companies pretty easily and be able to kind of get the value out of it to start mitigating those risks that you mentioned?
Easily is a funny word. So easy for whom is you know what I would say to that. A lot of the technologies are easy and cheap is what you look for, right? What do they say? You can have it, sure. You can have it fast, cheap, or done well, but you can't have all 3, right? But it depends on what's important to the contractor, right? So a lot of them will say that a sophisticated solution like an IoT sensor for water mitigation is too expensive. But it's expensive for a reason, because it's really valuable. Right. So it depends on the priorities of the contractor. If they're not truly committed to innovation, then everything's going to be too expensive and too complicated and too much trouble for their supers or their project managers. The ones that are really invested are dedicating budgets to innovation and dedicating their teams to implementing that sort of thing. So we do an assessment called the TAMI, a Tech Adoption Maturity Index. And in there, we rank the contractor against their peers and against the industry on how they're doing with tech maturity. And some of the parameters in there. So we go through various use cases, water mitigation and telematics and imagery and drones and pre-qualification software and equipment management, et cetera, et cetera. And some of the parameters in there are, where is your budget going? Is it part of your IT budget, or is innovation a separate budget? What are you communicating to your company when you create a separate budget for innovation? What's your leadership team look like? What's your roadmap look like? And I'll tell you, there's a direct correlation between high scores in those areas and the ability to adopt tech in a meaningful way. So is all the tech easy to adopt? Absolutely not. The construction technology is still in its infancy, and some are doing it, the technologies are in various stages of maturity, right? Some of them are more in tune to the construction space than others, and those will get adopted more easily than some of the ones that are still struggling to come from, say, manufacturing into construction or built world into construction. But so it's a variety of variables. There are definitely the techs that we've chosen for our tech library are meant to be super valuable, easy to implement, easy to get the value out of. Eddy Solutions is a great example of that. They were one of the first on board simply because of the ease of use. So We're trying to help our customers do that by curating that list down to the ones that are easiest and most valuable to implement.
We've
Yeah, and
seen
if I
kind of
could,
similar. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, and if I could just add to that, I think that was a really interesting question, Ryan, and Rose had a lot of good points. I think there has to be a certain level of ownership on the supplier. We need to make the transition to working with us as easy as possible. And like we mentioned, technology in the construction space is still fairly new. It hasn't been around for 30, 40 years. So there's a lot more hand-holding and guidance and walking through the use of the technology. So one of the things for us at Eddy, we want to make the transition to working with us as seamless as possible. Is it easy to install leak detection for all buildings? No. Do we try to make it as simple as we can by making sure we're a part of the entire process? So one of the things that we like to do is we're not just a hardware company. We want to be a part of the entire ecosystem when it comes to leak detection. So from hardware to installation to service, support, 24/7 monitoring thereafter. I think those are all really important components for suppliers to keep in mind when looking to work with larger companies, as well as insurers and brokers. We talked about awareness earlier today. I think as a supplier, there's a certain level of ownership that we are a part of the discussions and helping the educating component, whether it's internally with the insurance staff, broker staff, or externally with their clients as well through the tech tapas like Rose had mentioned that AXA Excel has.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I would say,
go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, you can, I guess, talk about, is it easy to implement all this tech? It is getting easier. It has been very hard. Or is it kind of harder to deal with the issues that you've been dealing with, for the past decades, of all these things that make your schedule go way out of balance. They affect your budgets. When you have a claim that's a water damage of tens of billions of dollars, how far back is that pushing you? Like it's an investment now, but you're going to reap the benefits of it pretty soon when you realize that, yes, it is going to help make you more productive. It's going to give you that competitive advantage, and it's going to help you down the line, if you're GC, it's going to help you with your owners, because a lot of this stuff kind of transfers into the operations of the asset. So it really is, the life cycle of the asset that you're building is going to benefit, and you're going to have the brand behind it.
Absolutely, those are all fantastic points. And Chris, I wanted to kind of ask you.
To that,
oh, go ahead, Rose. Go ahead, Rose.
Do you mind? One thing that I found really interesting recently is that a lot of technologies think that they're competing against their use case competitors. But they're not. They're competing against every tech on the job site, because a job site can only really adopt and digest so much data and so much tech. So, for instance, Eddy Solutions, you're not competing against another water mitigation technology on the job site. You're competing against water mitigation technologies, wearables, imagery, drones, etc., because a project management team can really only work with a certain amount of technology, and vetting out what's the most valuable 2 or 3 technologies to adopt on a project that's becoming one of the sticking points too. If they could adopt everything, some of them would, but they can only handle so much. So that's another piece of it, is the competitive aspect.
Absolutely. I think it's something that's probably overlooked often, and feels like the more data, the better. But in reality, it does take time for these organizations to adopt one piece, one solution or for use case, and then prove that out, prove the value, the ROI, and then adopt the next piece. So at some point, it does become a whole different world that they're managing. And that's something I think over time will become something that probably becomes easier to adopt, easier to handle. But at this time, you're right, they are competing kind of with each other, even though they're not in the same use case per se. There's something you mentioned a little while ago, which I wanted to kind of bring back up, which is the insurance industry has traditionally been a slow moving world. How are you all kind of seeing this change? And Chris, I wanted to start with you to kind of see what your experiences are on this front.
Yeah, I mean, the industry has been, very archaic for a long time now, but lately, there's a lot of insurance companies actually, they're all at the table now. We're all having discussions around tech, IoT, construction technologies, how everything kind of fits into kind of a new model of underwriting. And, Rose and AXA has been a big part of that with us. And, we've really been pushing the boundaries of what we can do, because once everyone has skin in the game, everyone who makes that investment, we're all going to win. It's really going to affect the GCs because they're going to be more productive. It's going to affect the insurers because they can be more profitable. And it's our job as brokers to help our clients out. So traditionally, I can see the perspective of the insurer. It's been the chicken and the egg problem. They want the data to be able to underwrite properly, but technology is new. It hasn't necessarily been on a lot of projects yet. But it's a new way of kind of looking at it actuarially. We have to kind of imagine, okay, if we look at a particular contractor, we do a deep dive on their root cause of loss and say, had you had, say Eddy solutions on this project, you would have had that mitigation delta for your claims. This is the reduction in your severity. This is going to be the reduction in your frequency that you would have had, for the past few decades, had you had a water mitigation play. Say that valve would have automatically turned off before that leak turned into a flood on a Friday night before someone saw it. So it's really everyone kind of coming together to see this kind of new wave and understand that mitigation delta. And we're doing great things with AXA, like with our HPP products, and just kind of like moving the needle on what we're calling some edge underwriting, where we're taking all of the data as it comes in dynamically right now and kind of like changing the way we see risks, because you're actually eliminating a lot of the risks that you had in the past. Your risks are becoming more attractive now because we are taking steps to make things better for the industry. And now we're seeing, contributions coming in from all of the stakeholders, which also includes insurers. So I think that's some of the biggest changes that we're seeing in the marketplace.
Fantastic. Rose, how are you seeing this change?
Yeah, I want to expand on what Chris said a little bit here. Our HPP is our highly protected projects product. It's where we pair technology with a policy and offer preferred terms or favorable terms to our customers. So for example, if we put water mitigation on the policy, we might consider giving a reduced deductible in the event of a water loss. And if we put wearables on a job site, we might consider doing something special with the work comp rates in the US here. So there's a variety of other technologies that correlate with the policy, and we look at pricing it accordingly. Now, I'll say this, it's a leap of faith right now, because as Chris said, it's insurance is considered almost as laggard as construction in some ways. We struggle to innovate. We are highly regulated, and we're such a legacy industry. So that's why I really love the role I have now. I'm as head of construction innovation. This was a role that was created to shake things up. The president of our business unit, Gary Kaplan, and I created this role last year because we said we got to put our money where our mouth is. If we really want to innovate in construction and help our customers innovate, and also do something special with that in insurance, because after all, that's what we do, then we needed to have a dedicated role to it. So we created this role, and the HPP is a product out of that. And so what we're trying to do is, without any actuarial data, without any real calculations behind it, we're saying, okay, someone's got to put their toe in the water. Right. We'll do it. We will put a policy out there, and we will pair it with technology, and we'll provide something special to the contractor. And if we get a couple more of these, then we can start to put the data together and compare what it would have looked like with and without the technology, what the pricing looked like with and without the technology, and start to develop that return on investment that everybody's looking for. I mean, everybody's looking for ROI in tech. And I actually liken it to the way risk management was about 20 years ago. It was kind of a thing, not really. Some contractors had a risk manager. Some were doing it with a whole department. Those are the really progressive ones. But most were doing it with their chief legal officer or their chief financial officer or some sort of hybrid role, because they couldn't put an ROI on managing risk, right? It's very hard to quantify the risk that didn't happen. But over time, over the last 20 years, we have seen the value in managing risk from a holistic perspective in enterprise risk management. I think innovation in tech is going to be the same, where right now, if you can't quantify it, I think that's okay. I think it's okay to say, we got to put our neck out there, figure out what it looks like, quantify it, and then back into that and say, all right, now we know what it looks like, and we can create something that's really based on the science. But someone's got to do it. So we said, sure, we're in.
Makes a lot of sense. And from a tech supplier's point of view, Shkya, I'd love to hear what you kind of think there.
So from a supplier perspective, I actually think insurance is moving faster than ever before. Well, for insurance. When we started in 2015, I remember we'd be going out to meetings with insurance companies and we're like, well, we do water leak mitigation and the technology was so new. And Rose perfectly said, the problem was the data, right? So we're coming in as a new tech company and they're like, well, we need 10 years of data to be able to utilize it for our underwriting to see the impact. And coming in as a new tech company, you're not going to have 10 years of data. So you're going to need forward-thinking insurers like the AXA XLs of the world to come up and say, you know what, we understand that there's going to be a certain level of learning that's going to come with adopting new technology. And we might not have all the details that we need today, but we're able to still get ahead of the game by looking at these technologies and looking at ways we can implement it. So many of the larger insurers today, I think, are actively looking and adopting new technologies for their clients. And like we had mentioned, a lot now have innovation labs and teams that are specifically focused in on this space and making sure that they're adopting the new technologies for better risk and obviously overall better client engagement. Brokers, of course, like the Aons of the world, are also engaged to ensure their clients are receiving the best rates and coverage. And the most important component is that they're also helping with the insurance relationships to tell them, hey, we want to adopt these technologies for our clients. So I think earlier we spoke about having all the stakeholders involved. So not just the client, but also the brokers and the insurers. And that's really been able to drive the change in adopting technology a lot quicker than before.
So with these technologies, obviously in the connected and the IoT space, it's generating a lot more data. So how are you seeing the use of data evolving on your end?
So the use of data, sorry, I was on mute. The use of data is definitely evolving. I think a lot of things that we talk about data is too much data, right? Again, kind of going back to one of the points that Rose had, it's not about competing with other technology within the same space, right? But making sure that the data points that are received for the builds that are happening are important to ultimately what they're looking to do, which is mitigate risk, but also have some preventative measures. So as a supplier, our job is to make sure we're minimizing the amount of data for each client base that we're giving to give them really meaningful data as opposed to just a ton of data points that they don't know what to do with.
That makes a lot of sense. And Rose, you want to kind of tag in there for kind of as it related back to what you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's about being able to digest the data and then make an actionable decision. Actually listened to some feedback from one of our customers on a different technology, and they were all excited about the data. And then I said, well, okay, so how did it change the way you manage that project? And they said, oh, well, I mean, the data was really cool, but we didn't make any different decisions than we would have made without it. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. Because a lot of tech companies start with the data. And this is kind of interesting too. When I talk with tech companies, a lot of them will say, the first thing they'll say is, well, look how much data we can give you. And I say, well, contractors don't care about data yet. They don't. They will, but they don't right now. They care about adoption. And you can't have the data without adoption. So we need to focus on adoption first, and then the data will come. And then at that point, you can say, look at all the cool data I can give you. But when you're a tech company and you approach a contractor with, look how much cool data I can give you, there's very, very few that can ingest that data and make it actionable and make it usable. Most of them, it's not useful yet. We'll get
Absolutely.
there. We're not there yet.
Yeah. Chris, how are you seeing the use of data evolving on your end?
So, we'll touch on this a little bit later, but with companies like Lalium Technologies and JobSite Insights, bringing together, like a backbone of IoT, that's not, 100 different techs with all different silos of data. We're really seeing connectivity come into play. So like, when you talk about the nervous system of a building, you can feel something, say if it's on the human, you can feel something in your hand that goes up to your brain and it tells you something's going wrong. Maybe you have to shift something else. And it's really that like understanding like, okay, there's incidents that's happening all over your building. Data's coming in through IoT devices. And whether we can see, we start to get into the predictive state. So if A, B, and C happens, we're going to start learning, okay, that's going to lead to a big severity claim. But now with all this data coming in, we have a layer of AI and machine learning on top of that. We can start to say, okay, when A and B happens, address the situation now, because this has happened in the past. And with a certain level of certainty, we can say, you're going to have a big severity claim or an issue happen. So deal with it when you first see the incident happen, as opposed to, you know, seeing a train coming from 100 feet away, you're seeing it coming from 1,000 feet away. So that's really the power of everything kind of being connected and understanding what's going wrong when one incident is triggered with everything else in the environment.
Absolutely. And Chris, let me ask you about a kind of piece of the technology in particular. So here, how are you seeing construction automation platforms really helping kind of across the board here? Are you seeing this as a driving risk or a driving force in reducing the risk and claims you're seeing?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely the construction automation process is really, like I said, with Lattium technologies, things are becoming to come together on a single pane of glass. It's making things easier. You know, I've heard stories of walking into clients and they have, say, 16 different screens up on their wall. Each screen is showing the outputs of a specific IoT tech or construction technology company. So, you know, with all of that kind of coming on a single screen, we really start to understand everything I just said about the incident data through a single pane of glass. And it's about understanding specifically what's going wrong with a general contractor and saying, okay, let's look at your risk. Let's see where are your pain points and address those issues first. So bringing those together, it's pretty simple actually. If you have water, if you have concrete issues, if you have work injuries, then bring in the water IoT sensor like Eddy and bring in, you know, cameras that do 360 monitoring alongside wearables that can all connect together and say, okay, if a worker is doing this, he's either bending over incorrectly, or say the site isn't necessarily maintaining a clean environment, leading to certain things, incidents happening, and connecting all that together with even things like weather data to bring it all in a single pane of glass, so you can kind of see and apply those analytics to it. We really don't know what we don't know yet. And I think we're going to start learning a lot more about some of the issues that we can prevent as we put these together and carve them out.
Fantastic. Shkya, from your end, what are you kind of seeing and how with these construction automation platforms helping? How are they helping, and kind of are they really being a driving force to kind of the reduction of claims?
Yeah, so the construction automation platforms are certainly helping. There's a certain level of transparency and data that these platforms are providing constructors that are making it easier for them to make the best decisions real time, which is some of the points that Chris had there. We have clients that are sharing success stories around how we were able to stop major water damage claims for them during a build by them receiving an alert, having the water automatically shut off. Also being a part of a lot of the insurance events and conferences, we hear a lot of stories and people are putting together a ton of case studies to show what technologies are doing to mitigate risk for them overall. So there definitely looks to be a reduction in claims. And I think one of the funniest things when we deal with insurance companies, when we were kind of installing our products, they're like, well, what happens if nothing happens? I'm like, well, that's good news. So that's a success. Sometimes with a technology like Eddy, you want nothing to happen, right? That means everything has worked and you had a job that had 0 claims, no water damage, and the build got to go on as it's supposed to, and insurance didn't have a claim.
Rose, you want to jump in and quickly add your thoughts there?
Yeah, I just echo everything that Shkya and Chris said. I think that the data will come, and we'll figure out what that ROI is as we go.
Absolutely. But so let me ask you this: given the evolution into this space, how can insurers kind of help with this transition? And Rose, I'm more directing this at you, since you're in the carrier space. Perhaps you kind of kick this off.
Well, I discussed a variety of the solutions that we're doing here. What we've learned is that, back to your original point about education, what we've learned is supporting education and the resources and supporting tech adoption the same way we supported risk management for years is going to pay dividends for all the stakeholders in the value chain. Mm-hmm. And it's not something you can, like Shkya said, what happens if nothing happens? Good, that's great. And we can't quantify the risk that didn't happen, right? The claim that didn't happen. But we are trying to build more safely. We're trying to build more. We have a labor shortage in construction. We're trying to build more with less. So anything that we can automate or use robotics to supplement the labor force, all these things are going to make construction better. And construction needs a boost. I think that the McKinsey study said that we've gotten 3% increase in productivity over the last 20 years. We're the lowest ranking increase in productivity of any industry. And that's just because that's because construction is complex. Every single project is different and all the parties are different. Even if you build two buildings right next to each other with the exact same set of plans, all the subcontractors are different. The owner might be different. The contractors might be different. The ground might be different. It's everything you're doing is bespoke. And so every project is a new challenge. So it becomes a very difficult but opportunistic industry to involve technology because it's so challenging. So I think that from a carrier perspective, the more we can do to support our contractors, innovation is becoming the new risk management. So the more we can do to support our contractors, we know that it will make them safer, more productive, build quality buildings that we all get to work, live, and play in. And at the end of the day, I'm certain that it will pay dividends for all of us in the value chain, but we're not going to see that ROI right off the bat. Looking for it in 5-10 years, but we got to be part of the solution. We got to be part of the journey.
Absolutely. Chris, what about from the broker world?
Yeah, for us, it just started years ago with bringing together people with a passion for technology and innovation and IoT. And, that's why we started the technology assessment panel, just because we wanted to help our contractors figure out, okay, what are the good construction tech companies out there, the good prop tech companies, how are you going to get the value that we can derive out of there and really attach all the stakeholders together. And then it starts with an investment in that space. So you need to have people dedicated to helping out and pushing the envelope and not really just think about, cheap insurance. It goes so much beyond that. It's more about creating sustainable value for our clients, right, and really looking at, how to make them a better contractor, how to make them a better owner or a better designer, and talk to them about, that competitive advantage and how we can help with innovation.
Fantastic. And Shkya, anything to add here?
Yeah, I think just really quickly to kind of reiterate the point, I think insurers are key for driving awareness and around risks, and also being able to talk about the benefits of technology, not only for their client base, but also to their brokers as well. So brokers like Aon are essential in helping drive the message to the end users and the clients. And these are the things that are really going to help increase adoption and push technology forward in these spaces.
Absolutely. And Shkya, I have you here kind of, since we are all very passionate about IoT, automation, what are some of the things that need to happen from insurance construction to make these types of technologies more of a mainstream in the industry?
So kind of what I was saying in my last answer there, it's really important to have for the suppliers to have great relationships with the insurers, the brokers, and ultimately the end users. Like we've talked about in the panel today, there's a lot of stakeholders involved, and there needs to be a mutual understanding and alignment on the goals and the overall outcomes that are looking to be achieved on these projects. And just continuing to build awareness of the technologies that are available are going to be essential to the success for everybody involved. Sharing success stories and case studies are also really important. Like Rose mentioned, some of these technologies we don't have 10 years of data on. So the good thing is we do have a lot of data today, a lot more than we did probably years ago when we started, but over the course of the next few years, we have to continue to utilize that data, share those success stories. And I think that's definitely going to make a big change in the space.
Absolutely. Rose, what do you have to say on this one?
Yeah, I just think that sharing of the lessons learned is the way to go. I mean, we've created a couple of knowledge networks here in the vein of education. We keep going back to that. The idea is that everybody's trying to figure this out one at a time. And when you put all the smart people in a jar and shake it, you get a lot farther than if everybody's trying to do it at the same time. It's the same thing with risk management. And from what I've talked to from our contractor customers, they don't see tech adoption, the best practices for tech adoption, as a trade secret. They don't see it as a competitive as the secret sauce of their company, right? They do want to elevate the whole industry together, and that's why we put together our innovator circle. And we have another group called the Collaboratory. It's like a collaborative and a laboratory put together. But we're finding that knowledge networks are getting a lot of traction because people want to share ideas with each other, and you know,
Sure.
you get there faster that way.
And Chris, anything to add here?
Yeah, just bringing everyone together at the table, all the stakeholders, and bringing them together early to have that conversation. And you know, the ones that are doing this now, they are going to elevate the industry, and it'll only go faster if everyone's at the table with skin in the game. Because once that happens, it really is going to be a win-win-win for all the stakeholders.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, everyone. I think this is our audience is probably getting a ton of value out of it. We've seen a number of questions come in. So with the about 10, 12 minutes we have left here, let's go ahead and dive into those if you don't mind. So I want to pick out the first one here. The question is, I work for a small construction management company who doesn't self-platform. Is there value in my organization trying to apply IoT devices to mitigate risk on our subcontractors' behalf, or should I wait for them to implement it themselves? Would any of you like to take that one?
I can take that one.
Yeah.
So, you know, we work with a lot of contractors. Not sure what is meant by small, but what I would say is, as small as you may be, your subs are smaller, likely. So if you wait for them to adopt it, you may fall behind. So I would suggest that you can be the catalyst that helps your subcontractors figure out the value and the you know, the general contractors tend to be more sophisticated than subs generally, not exclusively, but I would say that you can help your subs get there by introducing them to IoT, and then you have a bit more control over the job site, and you're partnering with your subcontractors, and you're showing them that their risk is your risk and your risk is their risk, and you're in this together, and perhaps you'll get some of them to step up to the plate for the next job.
Yeah, I would say,
yeah, go ahead.
They're all going to get better. So I would say, don't wait. Something like a job site insights, it actually scales, from the small end for very small operations and sites to everything up to, hundreds of thousands of square feet for an asset. So I would say, you're not too small and you don't need to wait. So.
Shkya, anything to add on your end before I grab another question from the audience?
Yeah, no, I think just to kind of echo Rose and Chris there, I don't think it depends on actually the size of the company or the project that you're working on. You have platforms like JSI that Chris mentioned that's able to scale. And I also think there's a lot of companies that might not have an innovation team or a technology team. So sometimes you do need other people to kind of step out of their comfort zone and say, hey, there's ways to do this better, and here's what's in the market. And to Rose's point, let's make sure we're not kind of falling behind.
Yeah, I would say,
Absolutely.
talk to your broker and we'll get the insurance and all the techs at the table. And if you don't necessarily have the knowledge, then like everyone said here, it's just about education and just having that conversation.
Absolutely. So the next question I pulled here is, the question is tech on the roadmap for inclusion within building codes? If yes, can you provide an understanding of what tech and timeline is or would be?
So I've not
jump in on that.
Yeah, I've not seen anything in the construction space on that. But again, I'm working for XXL now. I spent many years in the field in construction, but so I'm a bit isolated from the field in the last 6 years or so. I haven't heard anything from our contractors about tech being required as part of building code, and I don't suspect that we will unless someone's willing to pay for it. I haven't heard anything from our contractors on that front yet.
Yeah, same. I think it's on the roadmap. I think we'll get there once we figure out, the right combination of IoTs for specific assets. We could get something like a LEED certification, but I think it's on the roadmap, but it's not here today.
Okay. Anything to add there before we move on?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. But I think one thing that's really important to add is we talked about how water is kind of really frequent as it relates to claims, and fire used to be as well, right? And now you have all these building codes for carbon monoxide detectors and sprinklers in buildings. So I definitely think things will go in that direction. I haven't heard of anything yet, to kind of echo my panelist here, but I would not be surprised if in the next 5-10 years, something like this would be more mandated and part of building codes.
Sure.
So I'm going to add one more thing to that. So building codes are, I'm an engineer by trade. I have a license in a couple of states. So that's where I came from. And building codes are primarily designed for life safety. That's what they're meant for. They're not meant to ensure quality. They're not meant to ensure comfort, and they're definitely not meant to be innovative. They are meant to preserve life safety. So, and they're the bare minimum. So meeting the bare minimum building codes means you'll get a check mark and you'll get your CVO, but they're not meant to be forward thinking. And so I would suggest that if you're only doing the building code, if you're only rising up to the building code level, that you're probably, you're doing the bare minimum, and that's okay. That's why I don't think we have tech in the building codes as of yet, because it's not meant to be forward thinking. It's just meant to be the minimum that can be done to preserve life safety.
Gotcha. Fantastic. Another question from the audience is, do you have any of the mentioned solutions, AI, DWML, in place, or are we just talking more about the future?
There are solutions in place right now. I mean, we're working with our partners like JSI, Latium, and Eddy, and there are lots of projects with tech out there. And like getting the AI. I think it requires more people to come to the game. There are still silos of AI that we're learning specifically around point solutions, but we're getting better at identifying everything as it comes together as a holistic package.
Yeah, anything to add there? Yep, go ahead.
Absolutely. There are numerous technologies, and even in our library, that are using AI and ML to produce data that's actionable. But then further than that, it's about predictive. It's going to be about predictive next. So when you're looking at risk, and I've spent my whole career in risk, the first thing you want to do is understand what the risk is. The next thing you want to do is manage that risk to a controllable state, right? This risk goes over here and it's managed by this, that risk goes over there. The three things you can do with risk are: you can take it on, you can give it to someone else through contractual liability, or you can buy insurance for it. Insurance is only one of the pillars of managing risk. So when we think about first understanding the risk, and then controlling the risk, and then optimizing the risk, because believe it or not, you can actually make money through taking on some risk if you know how to control it properly. And this last phase of that is predictive. Is being able to predict the risk. And if you can predict what's going to happen, then you get a lot better quality projects. You deliver them on time, on budget. You can even make some money in bonuses and so on and so forth. So there are AI and ML out there that are working on the predictive side, and that's the next phase in my mind.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It looks like we got to wrap up here to get everybody over to the next session. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've learned a lot on my end. I'm sure our audience has got a ton of value out of this. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for taking the time to prepare for this and to share your insights with our audience. It's been fantastic. And thanks also to everybody who was able to join this session. The next session, which will start at 11 o'clock, is titled Smart Buildings to Smart Cities. So have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.